All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us live. Let me know in the chat where you're all joining from. We're going to get started here in a couple minutes once we give some people opportunities to join. Always at the beginning of these, I like to give people a heads up. If you are having kind of any issues with the audio or video, just give it a quick refresh. Sometimes when you join, like right at the start, for some reason, you can have some like glitches with the audio and video. So if you're having any troubles with that, just go and do a quick refresh of your browser, and hopefully that will clear it up. All right, looks like we've got a lot of people joining. Wisconsin, California, Florida, North Carolina, New Jersey, South Carolina. All right. Very heavy on the East Coast and California. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Let me get us kicked off here. All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm Franz Payer of Skyline, and today we're going to be going over some career advice. This session is specifically geared towards first-time job seekers. So particularly if you're still in college and you're coming close to graduation, that's kind of my goal, is to help you out. And my goal as well is for this to be a pretty interactive session. Want to be able to take a lot of questions from the audience and see how I can be beneficial to you all here. So I just have a few slides. Mainly, I just want to give a couple like general overview and general advice and guidance. And then we're going to go primarily and focus on all of the different questions that we have coming in from the chat. So with that being said, our quick agenda here, just 3 things. Number 1, just giving an overview of what the hiring process looks like. I think this can oftentimes be pretty beneficial, especially if you are someone who has not applied to a job before. Like, understanding how the process works can be pretty useful. Good context. The second thing is just general advice to strategize a job hunt. How can you kind of set yourself up for success there? And then the third thing is how to improve your resume. I think this is like the big question that I always get from people, and I've got a couple thoughts on this, but really I want to look at people's questions and kind of answer it from there. All right, so starting with the hiring process, I'm going to show both the perspective of the candidate and the perspective of the employer. So this is the candidate perspective. What you're going to do first, you find a job that you like. They're going to say, hey, go and apply on our website, or go to the job board and apply there. So you go, you submit the application, you submit your resume. Then the recruiter is going to look at your resume, and if they're interested in your resume, then they'll reach back out. They'll typically do an initial screening. When this is happening with the recruiter, usually what they're doing is they're just trying to vet out if what you put on your resume is like legit, and whether or not it maps to what they're looking for the job. So this isn't where you're going to get a lot of like technical questions. It's more of just kind of just a general baseline initial, like, hey, does this seem like a fake applicant, like someone lying about their application? Or, are they going to get catfished? That's kind of like their initial, the purpose of that screen. Then you'll typically have 1 or more technical interviews. I just put these examples here as an overview, but this is going to be very different depending on the employer, right? Like, some of them will do fully online interviews. Some of them want to do an in-person interview. Sometimes it's just like you and the hiring manager. Sometimes you have a team interview. That is very different depending on the specific employer, but generally you're going to have some sort of technical interview. And the key things to keep in mind here: the recruiter, typically they don't have a lot of like specific technical background. They're kind of more of an HR role. That's a general thing, though. Like, there might be some recruiters who are a little bit more technical, but then you have the hiring manager. That's your future boss, and they're the ones that are typically going to be doing the more rigorous technical interview with you. So just keep in mind like who it is that you're speaking to via email or on the phone. Like, is this the recruiter or is this the hiring manager? Because the way that you want to present yourself is going to be slightly different. If you're talking about the recruiter, you probably don't want to go like super intense in like the jargon. Like, you don't want to be like way too techie for the recruiter, because they might it might be hard for them to understand. And you want to keep in mind, like when you're speaking to them, like how are they reacting? Does it seem like they're understanding what you're saying, or does it seem like it's like too technical? And then adapt accordingly, right? I don't like making generalizations of like, hey, recruiters are not going to be technical. There are plenty of technical recruiters out there, but you don't want to make assumptions. You want to like, read their body language and identify like, are they understanding what you're saying? Are you going over their head? The same will apply as well to the hiring manager. Sometimes that can happen too. But with the recruiter specifically, that's something where they're typically going to be less technical than the hiring manager. And then if you're successful in that whole process, then you get your offer, and then hopefully you like the offer, then you accept it and you get your job. This process, generally speaking, will take about 1 to 2 months. And that's with the job that you ultimately end up taking. So keep in mind that you're probably not going to get the job at the first place that you apply to. So when you account for all the, the other times you go through this process with other employers that don't work out, that's adding time to your timeline, right? So if it takes you another 1 to 2 months to actually like find that employer where it does work out, you might be talking like 3-4 months before you actually get your job from the time that you actually start applying, right? So like that is a very, very important timeline. Especially if you're trying to consider your personal finances and stuff like that. Keep that in mind. Now, let's take a look on the other side, because we're talking about cybersecurity jobs and cybersecurity hiring. I like kind of looking at this from like a hacker mentality of like, what are the different perspectives from this? How is the system being designed, and how can you kind of account for that when you're applying for the job? So I'll give a good example here, which is, at Cyber Skyline, when we do our hiring, this is actually what those different stages look like on the flip side with actual numbers behind it. So this is from our most recent batch of hiring. And we did our hiring by putting a job listing on Indeed, and it was a plain job listing. We didn't pay for any sponsored ads or anything. This is just, we did a free account, we posted it up there, and this is what we got. And the big thing here is those numbers, right? So on a single job listing, we got 516 applicants. That's a lot, right? Like that, I personally was going through and looking at all the different applications that were coming in. We got 516 of them. I did not have time to look at them all, right? And so you can see here about 40%, like 2/5 of the applicants didn't get looked at. And if you're one of those people, I apologize. There's just a lot of people who apply for the jobs, and it's just like not practical to look through every single person. And of the people, about the 308 people that I did review, about 300 or so were rejected just based on the resume alone. And I actually reached out to about 13 people I did reach out to and say, hey, did you want to schedule an interview? Now, out of that 13, 5 of them we actually interviewed with, 6 of them ghosted me, and 2 were ineligible. Now, with this job listing specifically, this was requiring a public trust clearance, and we didn't have an ability to sponsor H-1B visa. So those are the 2 ineligible. And I have a feeling that some of the people who ghosted me were because when I reached back out, I said, hey, these are the requirements. Are you eligible or not? And they probably just ghosted me instead of responding. But that's what those numbers look like. And then we interviewed 5 people. 2 of the 5 we hired, 3 we did not hire. So we started at the beginning of this funnel of the 516. Only 13 of the 516 got an interview opportunity, and then 5 actually did interviews, and then 2 got hired out of that. So these numbers, like the percentage conversion here is pretty rough. And that's going to be the case for any employer that you apply to. Like if you're looking at like a really, really big, like Fortune 500 company, like those types of employers, there's a good chance that their numbers are like multiple times what I'm showing you right now, right? Where they might be hiring for one position, and they get like 2,000 applicants or 3,000 applicants, and they're still hiring 1 or 2 people for that position that they put out there. So that's kind of something that you want to be mindful of as the applicant, right? That's what these numbers look like on the other side of it. And so my my summarized takeaways from this is number one, the online like applying for jobs thing is really like a numbers game, right? Like you saw how it was there with how many people apply for those jobs, and just like a big percentage of those people, like I don't even have time to look at their resumes. So you should treat the online job board listings with that in mind, right? Don't get super attached to those applications. It's not a personal thing. It's just a time thing. It might not get looked at, right? It's just like too many people applying for the job. The second thing I would also keep in mind is that when you're applying online, it is super easy for people to apply online. Like I've seen people go on Indeed and then they will like go and they will click on like, like, okay, one click apply, one click apply, one click apply, one click apply. And in the span of like 10 minutes, they've applied to like 24 job listings, right? So that is probably one of the big contributors as to why the numbers look this way. And so if you are someone who puts in a lot of energy and effort to like up for every single job, like job application you put on a job board, you might want to reconsider that, right? Because if you're spending all this time like customizing for every single job that you apply to, you're losing the numbers game, right? You're just overly invested on each individual application, and unless there's something specific that's going on that you're going to be looked at, like it probably isn't worth your time. Just being very open and honest about it. So my recommendation is go to career fairs and conferences, because there's no one-click apply when you go and meet someone at a conference. If you go and you talk to a recruiter at a career fair or a conference, they maybe will talk to like 2 people, maybe 3 people. Those are way better odds than the 500 plus people that we're looking at on the previous slide, right? 516. If you go to a career fair, you talk to a recruiter, the recruiter talks to maybe 3 people, your odds are substantially better, and you actually jump straight into the reviewed section, right? Like you don't even have to worry about being in the not reviewed section. So my recommendation is try to do as many in-person hiring events as possible, and then apply on job boards in between waiting for those opportunities, because there isn't going to be a career fair every week or a local conference or local meetup every single week. Like that's what you can do when you're waiting for those opportunities. And also looking at those numbers, like start the process early, even before graduation. If you're not already aware of this, for some context, most of the companies that are doing specifically like university recruiting, like hiring people out of college, they are typically getting their jobs ready in the fall, and they're interviewing in the fall around this time, like October, November timeframe. They want to solidify who they want to hire out of college in the fall, and then in the spring, like when people graduate, then they start right away, and they don't have as much kind of hiring going on in the spring. Usually the spring hiring that they're doing is to fill the gaps that they didn't, of like people who fell through or things that didn't work out in the fall. So if you're a senior right now and you're thinking, hey, I'm graduating, in May, I don't have to worry about applying for a job until like, April, you're probably waiting a little bit too long. Like right now, if you have opportunities at your school to go to a career fair, I would highly recommend that you take it, because there's a good chance that, like you miss the good opportunities in the fall if you wait all the way to the spring. So, like very, very important things to keep in mind, right? Like really do this early. It takes a long time. And also, I think you have to take the Einstein mentality of this, where Einstein was like, or not Einstein, Thomas Edison, the Edison mentality on this, right? Of like, okay, I tried all these different materials to invent the light bulb. When you're applying for jobs, you're making progress by getting more experience every single time you apply for a job, every single time you interview. Even when you don't get the job, you are building experience. You are making progress. It's not something that's easy to see, but you are making progress, because otherwise it can, honestly, it can be very mentally difficult to kind of keep going through this process, because it is difficult. And I say this not to like try to like scare anyone or make people feel bad about it. It is just trying to be practical and realistic. And I think it does more damage when people come in thinking that it's going to be super easy, and then they discover it's actually very hard to get a job, and they get even more discouraged about that. So I just want to kind of give people that, like look into reality here. All right, so let's keep moving on. So strategizing your job hunt. Number one, you probably don't want to be applying to jobs just blind, right? Like you want to be strategic about where you're applying. And also, I did talk about how difficult it is for you to just get a job in general, but like you want to make sure that you're getting a job that you actually want. You don't want to just get any job, because that's not great either, right? You could get a terrible job that you don't want, and it might have been better for you to just like keep applying for more jobs for like another couple weeks, rather than like you take a bad job and it takes you months to find out that it's bad, and then now you have a job, so you're like, well, do I really want to like give up this job for another job? You kind of get stuck in it a little bit. So you want to actually be a little bit selective about where you're applying to begin with. So consider like company purpose and values. I know there's a lot of people who like if you are wanting to do government work, right? Like the values of that, of like kind of, you might be sacrificing a little bit more of like the salary that you can make, but hey, you get to work towards a mission that you care about, or you get better benefits than you might in the private sector. Those are all different trade-offs that you need to consider. Small versus big company as well. Like the bigger the company, especially with government, right? The more bureaucracy that you're going to have, the more like kind of rigid structure of like, hey, everyone has these set schedules. This is exactly how everything's done. There's a lot of like, you have to fit within the structure. And there's a little bit less flexibility. If you want to like try new things, you want to like, get things kind of approved in your org. If you're doing that in a very strict bureaucracy, a very strict structure, it's difficult for you as a newbie to come in and say, hey, I want to try these new things. We should do things differently, and actually have that enacted. If you're talking about a smaller company, then you might actually have a lot more say in kind of having your ideas and thoughts be implemented. And then of course, there's the classic in-person versus remote, trade-off that you want to consider. Something that I will note for people who are coming out of college in particular, don't discount the value of an in-person job, especially with a lot of like the Zoom university going on post-COVID. There's a lot of value in kind of like seeing how a company and organization works in person firsthand, that you're not going to get if you could jump straight into remote. And I know there's a lot of people who will benefit from having that in-person, the structure that in-person provides. Because when you're remote, you're given a lot more flexibility in how you operate, and that can be more difficult to actually get your job done sometimes. Sometimes you actually will want the structure to help you get your job done, and in-person can provide that. So something to consider, like remote has a lot of flexibility, has a lot of benefits, but I think one of the biggest trade-offs is that you get to be less connected with people, and you don't understand the structure of how companies and businesses work, as well as you would if you had an in-person job. So something to keep in mind. Another strategy here, adapt your resume to appeal to the type of employer that you're looking for. So government employers, they do the opposite of a lot of job advice that you'll hear, because most of the job advice you'll get is from corporate. But they typically want multi-page resumes. They want you to put every little thing that you did, right? Like every single credential that you have, every single job experience that you had, all the things that you did for those different jobs. Like they want every little thing. Most corporate employers do not want that. They're like, that's too much for us to read through. We got so many applicants here. Give me the summary, make it easy for me to understand. And then the other thing as well, consider that your resume is actually a way for you to filter out employers. So the common example that I use for this is that if you're wondering, hey, I know Python, do I want to put that I know Python 3.10 or 3.11? Like, do I need to put that specific version number? And my question to you would be, do you want an employer? Do you want to be working for an employer where that specific version of Python, like that's the make it or break it for whether or not you get hired, right? Because if you putting down that I know Python is not enough, and they specifically are like, we want someone who knows Python 3.11.10, what does that mean about that employer? Right? Like it means that they're probably going to be very rigid, and like, does that mean that they're not going to have a lot of confidence that like if they hire someone who just knows Python 3, that they can't figure out like Python 3.11 versus 3.10? Like that is a little bit telling from the employer. And sometimes it also means that there's a huge disconnect between the technical side and HR, right? Like the engineering team, or whoever it is, they say, hey, we want someone that knows Python, and then HR might say, well, what version of Python? They're like, okay, whatever latest is 3.11. And like they don't have enough communication between each other to realize that like, okay, we're looking for someone who knows Python. The specific version is not like the make it or break it, right? But that might end up being the thing that gets used as a filter, just because you have so many applicants. And if that's what's being used as a filter, I don't know if that's what you really want from an employer. So that's just my personal opinion on that. I encourage you to like ask yourself those questions, right? And the last thing here, meet people who work at your desired employers. So that, again, conferences and meetups, right? That's the best way for you to actually get a good shot at a job, because I've heard so many horror stories of people who will only apply for jobs online, and they're going, again, back to this slide here, right? They're playing this game. This game, not fun. This is not a fun game. You want to do everything you can do to boost your odds. So if you're very, very like against going to do like in-person events, you're going to be playing this game. It is possible. It is painful. So, keep that in mind. If you want to do the best, like the most things that you can do to improve your odds, in person is the best thing that you can do to improve your odds of actually getting a job. All right. Last thing before I go to all the questions here. How to improve your resume. These are quick overviews. So, you all can read this. I will kind of do the big highlights here and some of the more general takeaways. Number one, I have this asterisk at the bottom here. I've seen a lot of times where there will be like resume review workshops, or, recruiters will give their specific advice on, how to structure your resume. I would say you probably should be careful of feedback that is too specific, right? Like if someone is saying, hey, you should really have this section in front of this section, right? Like your education should come before work experience, or your list of skills should come here, right? Every single recruiter is going to have a different personal preference. So if you listen to one of those people, then congrats, you made your resume, appeal to them. But unless they're about to give you a job, you have to consider all the other recruiters who are going to be looking at that resume who might prefer a different type of formatting, and you're not going to know, right? And so like, don't hyperfixate on like, do I put this section in front of that section? Like, where does this go? Is like, do I put a list of my rewards or achievements or stuff like that? That leave that up to you, right? If you think that it's important, then you put it there, right? But don't be overly prescriptive, or like don't overly prescribe to what a recruiter might say about formatting. The general guidance is, make sure your resume is legible. If you're using some weird font, if it's too small, that's not helpful to anyone in general. Don't put arbitrary skill values. I see this a lot. If you say, hey, I'm a 3 out of 5 in, let's just go back to Python, right? I have no idea what your bar is for like that 1 to 5 scale, right? Like your interpretation of a 5 out of 5 is going to be different than my interpretation of a 5 out of 5. So the first thing I do when I see one of those ratings is I immediately just pretend it doesn't exist. I just assume that you know something about Python, but like I have no idea if you're a good judge of your level of Pythons. Okay, so it's like you're better off kind of just omitting that. And then other general advice here. I will see people who will list, hey, I had this job or I had this experience. Here were my responsibilities. That is not going to help you stand out. So let's just say that you had like an IT desk support role, and you put in here like, responded to support tickets, was on call, like listing your specific responsibility, like helped people fix their laptops, right? Like if that's what you're listing on there, then you have no way of differentiating yourself from the next person over who also had an IT help desk. And when I'm looking at these, these resumes are going to look identical, right? The person A had IT help desk and person B had IT help desk. I can't interview everyone. Which one I'm going to hire, right? So it's actually more important, rather than just writing the specific responsibilities that you had, to demonstrate the impact that you had, right? So if you're doing IT help desk, right, if you had the fastest response times of anyone on your team, put that on there, right? Like, was number one in response times, or like this rating with customer satisfaction, right? Like, put things there that demonstrate the impact that you had. Maybe you helped like reduce response times by like 50%. Like, putting those things that actually say, I had this responsibility and this is what I delivered. The what you delivered part is the thing that's going to set you apart from the next applicant. So don't just put down the list of responsibilities. Like, write down like, what is the impact that you made. This is especially true if you're putting down job experience that is not technical. So let's just say you had like a job at a restaurant, and you want to highlight that you have some of that experience. Like, talk about, like maybe you're kind of like handling like orders, right? Taking people's orders. If you're a waiter, you can talk about like being very good at not messing up the orders, right? I don't know what stats that like a lot of restaurants are keeping about that, but anything that you can do to demonstrate like, not only did I have a responsibility, but I was good at it, right? Like, showing that you're good at it is what employers are looking for. All right. The last piece of advice I'd give when it comes to resumes here is that a lot of times people will be like, hey, should I have this on my resume? Is this a good way to phrase what I'm trying to say on my resume? Take a step back, put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter and say, if I knew nothing about this person, and this is the only thing I knew about this person is what is on this piece of paper, right? Ask yourself, is that statement, that sentence, is that something that is going to convince me that they can do the job? And if the answer is no or that's an indication that you should either cut it or improve it, right? So like, I will oftentimes see people who will list like a dozen different skills on like their resume, where they start listing like every single different framework that they've used, right? Oh, I've used like this Python package and this Python package and this Python package. Odds are a lot of those, unless you're looking for a job that specifically requires like a particular Python package, like some sort of like statistical analysis or something like that, the recruiter might not even know what those packages are. And more importantly, they're probably wondering like, okay, how good are you in those things, right? And they're going to figure that out during the interview process. So, you might be better served like using the space on your resume to like highlight an impact that you made at a previous job, rather than like listing 5 more different Python frameworks that you've used. So yeah, like that's the optimization that you need to make. And you need to really put yourself in the perspective of the employer and make that call. Don't rely too much on what specific people will tell you, because they're telling you their opinion, but like no two people are going to be the same. And the next recruiter that looks at your resume might think differently. All right, so I know that was a lot. I'm going to go through a lot of these questions, which have been piling up for sure. And if you got any questions, please ask in the chat. I'm going to go through and see here. The first question, people ask about ghosting. So with the slide that I had up with the numbers over here, the ghosted is the applicant ghosting me. I presume that either they already got another job, or they actually like looked at the job listing even more after I responded to them and they were like, hey, I'm not interested. Or I said, hey, we can't sponsor H-1B. Do you still want, can you take this job? And they just ghosted me instead of like responding back. Kevin's asking, are the 308 rejected using ATS? I assume you mean the 295. The 308 was the number reviewed. The 295 was rejected. They were not automatically rejected. I cannot speak to every single employer. At least when I was doing this process, I did not do any automatic rejections. If I rejected It's because I specifically looked at it and I'm like, I don't think that it's going to be a good fit. Now, the ATS, like Indeed, will try to like do AI to kind of like look through the resume and prioritize the resumes that I can look at based on how well they think that the resume matches the job description. Me as the employer, I have the option to change what sort order I want. So I can say, do I want to sort based on like most recent, or do I want to sort based on, you know, what the AI thinks? And I can also ask specific questions about like, you know, how many years of experience do you have in these different things? And I can sort based on people's responses to those questions. So yeah, at least in this example that I provided, the rejections were not automatic from the ATS. I manually went and rejected those. All right, next question here. Okay, we got a lot of comments in here. People kind of like looking through. Also questions about like sharing resume templates. I don't have any offhand, but what I will say is with the resume templates, you can find a lot of them online. Just make sure that it isn't like super crazy, like just plain and simple is a good way to go. Also, when you apply for online job boards, always upload the PDF. Do not upload the Word doc version, because the employer will see a preview of your resume and the formatting in Word docs will get messed up almost guaranteed. If you do a PDF, it will look the way that it looked when you exported it as PDF. If you do a Word doc, if you're using like a font that isn't supported by the browser or what have you, the formatting is going to get completely thrown off and it will look terrible. So always like use your PDF version. Then some advice here actually from Kevin, fit the keywords and items that support or supplement the things mentioned. So I know there has been kind of like the rise of a lot of like AI ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems going in and doing a lot of the filtering. My advice for that is the ATS, like the ATS is looking for keywords. Like they're looking at what you have in your resume and what you have in the job description, or what the employer has in job description, and it's doing that matching. So it is beneficial to mirror a lot of language there. Double-edged sword though, right? Because you got to keep in mind that after you get through the automatic filtering by any sort of ATS system, a recruiter is going to look at it. And if your resume looks like AI wrote it because you're trying to like do keyword matching, then they might reject it off, you know, like immediately after that as well. So that doesn't help you that much either. So, you know, do some of the keyword matching in there, but do it in a natural way. Like don't do what people do with the YouTube videos where they'll just like stuff keywords into the description just so that like, you know, it feeds the algorithm, because as soon as you get a human actually looking at it, like they're going to be like, oh, this is someone who's just trying to game the algorithm and they don't take you seriously. So keep that in mind. Emmanuel is asking, will the PDF get through the ATS as well? So the PDF will work through the, like any of the automatic keyword matching through the ATS. If you've exported it like normally, you're not doing any weird stuff. The best way to check is that after you have converted your resume to a PDF, if you can copy and paste text out of the PDF, that means the ATS system will be able to read all the text properly. If you try to copy and paste the text out of the PDF and it's not coming out properly, then there's something wrong with your export and you got to fix that. So yeah, that's the best way to kind of verify if the PDF is exported properly. Most effective ways to show skills in penetration testing, participation in hackathons. So specifically for pen testing, I will give just a general word of advice. There are not very many pen testing jobs percentage-wise as a total of the number of cybersecurity jobs. You're probably talking about like 10% or less of cybersecurity jobs are pen testing jobs. Also, a lot of pen testing jobs tend to be more senior. They're typically not very many pen testing jobs for people straight out of college. That being said, if you want to show off the skills in penetration testing, probably the best way to do that is to kind of like go find local businesses, like a mom and pop shop that's in your area, and offer to do something for them for free or a reduced rate or something like that, and just have that experience that you can put on there. Something that I would recommend, if you're doing a penetration test, you're going to hopefully do a pen test report. You have a public link to a pen test report that you can do. If you're doing like a hackathon or a bug bounty or something like that, if you can turn that into a pen test report that you can share online, that's pretty useful to put on your resume and link to it. You might not be able to make your report public if you're doing this for a specific customer, but having the customer experience is valuable, and also having that sample is super valuable. So yeah, I would recommend, especially like just, if you have the report like on GitHub or something like that, link to that in your resume. A hiring manager, if they see your resume, they will be interested in taking a look at that. Another question, I've been told that you should put your volunteer experience under the same umbrella as work experience. Do you recommend doing that as well, or is that a personal thing? I don't have a strong opinion on this. I think that this is likely a personal thing up to individual recruiters. So yeah, do what you think feels the best for you, you think is the best way to portray yourself. And that's probably the best way to go. All right. How many certifications at a minimum should an applicant have in order to get a recruiter/hiring manager's attention? This is a pretty loaded question. I don't think you're realizing how loaded this question is. So first of all, it depends on the employer. Generally speaking, certifications are a bigger deal when you're talking about regulated industries and government work. So if you're talking about like financial entities like banks and stuff like that, they might have requirements for certifications. Those requirements are typically not a quantity. It is specifically like, we are looking for someone with this particular certification. Same thing goes for government. So you should look at the job requirements and see if they require any specific certifications. Oftentimes, unless it's an explicit job requirement, having the certifications there is more of like a bonus rather than like being used as a filter. And honestly, sometimes I see recruiters kind of get overwhelmed with certification spam. If you list like, here are the 5 certifications that I have, like I have, these 3 CompTIA certs, I've got, CEH, I've got OSCP, like I have all these different certs. It's a little bit too much. My recommendation is to actually replace your more entry-level certs with your more experienced certs, right? So if you have Security Plus, that is more advanced than Network Plus. And so put Security Plus and you can probably skip Network Plus unless the job requires it. OSCP is considered more of a experience level certification. So maybe if you have OSCP, you don't need to put Security Plus on there. I know CompTIA has some more like advanced certifications as well, but generally try to replace your more advanced certs with your or replace your more beginner certs with your more advanced certs, so that you avoid the fatigue that recruiters are going to have. Going back to the number of applicants there, when someone's just like scrolling through resumes, everything starts to blend together. So actually, a lot of times, like fewer, more impactful things is more important than just volume. Question on how difficult is it to get an entry-level position if you've never worked help desk, coming for career change? Also, how to overcome imposter syndrome when getting hired and failing to land a job. I don't know how to describe like the difficulty of getting an entry-level position. And it also really depends on your strategy. I think if you're going to only apply online, the difficulty I would say is probably a 10 out of 10. If you don't have like previous job experience related to your career, like cybersecurity, and that's what you're applying for, then, going back to these numbers, right? There's a likelihood that out of the 516 applicants, 16 applicants that we had here, a lot of those applicants are going to have some sort of job experience in cybersecurity that you don't have. And those are the people that are going to get those interviews when you're applying online. Now, when you go and you network with people in person and you talk to a recruiter in person, you skip this initial reviewed versus not reviewed. So you go jump straight into here. And also, out of just not being rude, people will listen to you when you come talk to them in person, and they don't just like immediately reject you, because it's so much easier to hit the reject button online than it is to hit the reject button in person. And they will actually listen to you, and you will actually get more consideration when you kind of are going for a job in person, you're talking to someone in person, than if you go online, right? They're not gonna, hopefully they're not gonna be super rude, but like they might actually consider you a lot more if you talk to them in person, even if you don't have that previous job experience. They will consider you a lot more than if you did that did that online, and that is to your benefit to do it in person. So, how difficult is it? I'd say that like if you're applying entirely online, mega difficult, 10 out of 10 difficulty if you don't have the previous job experience. If you're doing in person, the difficulty then is going to scale with how comfortable you are with talking to people in person. If it's very awkward for you, then that will be still pretty difficult. But if you find that it comes more naturally for you and it's not that difficult, then I think you have pretty good chances. Now, to the second part of the question, back to how do you overcome imposter syndrome when trying to get hired and failing to land a job? The way that I look at this, my advice, screenshot this slide, or put it in your memory. Don't take the rejection personally. Realize that it is a numbers game for you as the candidate. It's also number games for the employer, right? So when you don't get the job, it might not be anything to do with you. Actually, it's most likely not anything to do with you personally. It might be likely it's just like someone else kind of like, got more lucky, and they got like, they happened to get in the blue here with the reviewed, and you got in the orange here with the not reviewed. And this gap between the reviewed and not reviewed, right? For this job that we did, it's 40% not reviewed. So you had a 40% chance of just like not getting it right off the bat, right? Like that's just bad luck, and you can't control that at all. So when you go and apply to like 10 jobs online and you get 4 rejections immediately, you can say, well, 4 of those rejections was just, I didn't even get looked at, right? So don't take that personally. And then the ones that you did get looked at, like the recruiter could have easily kind of like was like looking at 2 people and they look too similar. And then they just don't do the interview. Something I've done, because there are so many people that apply for a job, if I see two candidates that like they have very similar experiences, and they both could in theory be qualified for the job, I actually end up rejecting both, because I'm like, I have a limited number of interview slots, and if there is nothing for me to differentiate these 2 people, then I actually don't want to interview either of them, because I need to find someone else that does stand out more. That sucks when you're doing kind of online job boards. But that is what's happening when the recruiters are looking at it, is actually if your resume looks too similar to someone else's, you might actually get rejected, because it's like, well, it wouldn't be fair for me to interview one person and not the other, because on paper they're exactly the same and they're both technically qualified. So I'm just not going to interview either of them. And then that's what happens. And then if you're talking about like imposter syndrome from interviewing and then not getting the job, I really go back to the Thomas Edison analogy here. It's likely that someone else was better at interviewing, at presenting themselves. Maybe they were like more articulate about talking about some of their experience, or they did a better job explaining something about their capabilities. So reflect on that interview and figure out like, okay, what could I have done better from that? How can I learn and improve? And see this as a stepping stone. You can see the numbers. It's rough. It's really rough when you kind of consider the likelihood that you actually get the job for any one role. So don't take it personally, and keep in mind that everyone had to start somewhere, and you deserve to get the job if you have the skills, and you just keep at it, and eventually you will get there. But it's not easy, and just know that it's not easy, and it's okay that it's not easy. I think that's probably like the biggest thing, is that like people, if they feel like it's supposed to be easy, I should be able to get a job, like why am I not getting a job? It's because they're not understanding the numbers well enough, that they will see the reason of them not getting the job as being their own personal failure, when in reality it's likely just because they are not winning the numbers game. And a lot of this is luck, right? Like, just for you to even be considered, so much of that is luck. And that's why I keep harping on go do things in person, because your odds are so much better. And it's way more depressing when you look at the online numbers than when you look at the in-person numbers. All right, what else we have? Should we apply to jobs that are suitable to us, as many as we can, have a high probability an online to get an interview call? Yes, 100%. If you are qualified for a job on paper, even if you don't think you might be the best fit, apply anyway, because you're playing the odds here, right? Maybe you jump in that 60% that actually gets reviewed. Maybe not. You need to play the volume game. Yeah, that's just the gist of it. Don't bother applying for jobs that you have absolutely no qualifications for, though, because then you just end up wasting your own time. And then mentally, it makes your numbers look even worse when you kind of look at how you've been doing. And that can be demoralizing, right? So I always say, like, if you have the qualifications on paper, even if you don't think you're the best, apply anyway. But don't waste your time if you don't even meet the qualifications on paper. Plus, that gets kind of demoralizing when you look at the numbers after the fact. Okay, what else do we have here? Questions. I'm getting some bugs with the chat where like the comments are overlapping each other. So apologies if I'm not seeing a question, because it's getting glitched out. What would you do if someone had extensive experience but they need to cut down their resume to 1 page? It's hard for me to give general advice on this without like knowing what it is that's contributing it going to 1 page or going beyond 1 page. Sometimes the reasoning is like, hey, you have like too much spacing, your font size is too big, you're not making good use of the space that you have on the page. Assuming that you're already optimizing for a lot of that stuff, I'd probably just cut down on stuff that like is not moving the needle. So like, if you're a recruiter and you read what you put down on some of your job experience, if you don't think that's impressive, take it out, right? Like, you should really only have things on there where everything that you have on there you feel is impressive. Unless you don't have enough extensive experience to fill up the space, then you can put more of kind of like the additional experience that maybe it wasn't like I reduced response times by 50%. But if you are having the problem where you have too much stuff, just trim everything that you don't think is going to be super impressive. I'm also seeing other people giving advice in the chat of like, using AI to help review your resume. I would recommend that. I would not have the AI automatically do your resume. Mainly for the whole thing that I said about like how when resumes look too similar to each other, I auto reject because I need a differentiation. So the AI, if everyone's using the same AI to help make the resume, they're all going to look the same. They're just going to have like, it's going to be like a Mad Lib where you just have a different Mad Lib and a different, job experience in each box, but like they look identical. But having AI to give you a second opinion is pretty useful. All right. What else we have here? How does the NCL scorecard come into play? Is it uploaded or referenced by a limited number of employers with access to NCL? So this is more kind of a question of like how NCL uses these. So we do not like sell your data to companies. We basically like have it so that when you get your scouting report and your score report, right, you control that. So you will get a copy of your report, your PDF, and there's also a shareable URL that you can decide whether or not you want that to be public or private. So with that URL, you can put that URL in your resume and act as kind of like a reference in there. One thing I will recommend, if you're going to put your NCL experience in your resume, don't just say, hey, I placed this placement in NCL. Because that number, unless you're going to be like, my general advice, unless it's going to be like top 10, top 15, top 20 or whatever, top 100, don't put the exact number. Maybe you can say like top 10% rather than like number 217, because at some point the number doesn't sound super impressive. But more important than the number, I don't know how many people have seen on LinkedIn, but like I see people on LinkedIn who they put on their profile like top 1% try hack me, or top 1% hack the box, or top 1% NCL. And it just seems like everyone happens to be top 1%. And it just doesn't, that just can't be possible, right? And I think a lot of times, like, a lot of those things kind of get phased out or tuned out by a lot of the employers with like the exact number. So what's actually more important than just putting like your performance is saying like, what did you demonstrate by participating in NCL, right? So if you can talk about your NCL experience like it was job experience and say that like, hey, I performed an audit on a web application, I found a SQL injection vulnerability, right? Like you treat it in that way, that's going to resonate a lot better with a lot of hiring managers, because they don't know what, like how good number 17 is or number 5 is, or number, like they don't know, they don't have a really good reference for that, other than like, that sounds like a good number or not, but that doesn't tell them what you can do. And so more important than putting your ranking is actually like describing the impact that you demonstrated through your participation, right? So, just like the advice I gave about the pen test report, of like having a sample report and like talking about like, what you were able to do, treat your CTF experience like that as well. Just like if it's NCL or any other CTF, like talk about like, hey, I used Splunk to like find indicators of compromise and track down, like identified an attacker exploiting a server, right? Like that type of stuff is going to be more precise in helping a hiring manager understand what you can do versus, hey, I was top 7 in NCL. What advice would you give to someone who completed their undergrad degree in 2024, currently pursuing master's in cybersecurity, secure a job in today's competitive market? I don't think there's a lot of specific feedback for like, when you graduated, or like, specifically what degree you're going for. I think a lot of the advice I would give is still the same, which is do in-person meetups and conferences, right? So if you got a local B-Sides conference, go to that. If you have local chapters of like ISACA or ISC squared, or like any in government contracting of AFCEA, like if you have any of those local chapters and meetups for cybersecurity professionals, go to those. Just like show up and just talk to people, right? Like you don't even have to say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Just meet people and become friends with people and say like, hey, like, I'm still learning cybersecurity. Like, what do you do? Do you have a job? What is your job like? I'm curious about that. And that will just help you get a foothold, so that when you do start applying for jobs, there's someone there that who can put in a good word for you, that can connect you directly with a recruiter, so that you're not playing this stupid numbers game with the job board, right? Treat the job board as the thing that you do when you're waiting for another in-person event to show up. If you're still in school and you have access to your school's career fair, go to that. That can help a lot. On the back end job board platforms, can recruiters see old resumes of candidates that were uploaded and deleted? No. I will only be able to see the version of the resume that you applied with if you had a different version of your resume. Then you updated it and then you applied. I don't see the original. I just see the most recent one before you applied. Some of them actually also allow the candidates to rescind their application, and then in that case, I don't even see the resume anymore. Some certifications, such as IC score, consider bachelor's degree in cybersecurity to be equivalent to experience. What's your opinion on this as a recruiter? Yeah, I can give you my personal opinion, but depending on where you go, it's going to be treated extremely differently. So if you're going for a government job, oftentimes your government jobs, your pay is going to be directly correlated to years of experience / education. And they will have a direct conversion of like, hey, a bachelor's degree is equivalent to like 2 years of experience. A master's degree is equivalent to 4 years of experience. Like they will have like formulas and equations that say, if you have this many years of experience and this degree, then like this is your pay, your pay scale for that. Similar thing applies to government contractors as well. If you go and apply at Google or Amazon or Microsoft or a lot of other private companies, they are not going to treat it that way. They are going to see, hey, you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. That's cool. What can you actually do? So they don't treat it as an equivalent, but it is something that does get factored in, right? Like they just don't have a specific formula for it most of the time. The government, they actually oftentimes have a specific formula, but most private companies, they will factor it in, but it's not going to be a very transparent formula on how that gets factored in. And sometimes, you'll have companies who are more open to hiring people without a degree than others. Some of them will have degree as a hard requirement. It really depends. So I can't give advice that's like universally applicable, but I will say, at least on the government side, a bachelor's degree or any other type of degree can be used as a direct equivalent to years of experience. All right. Any final questions we have here? I think we hit them all here. Yeah, final question here. What are good jobs to look for? Look for cybersecurity jobs. So, I mean, I don't think there are specific job sites for cybersecurity, but typically those job sites are for more senior level roles. So if you're looking for entry level, you're probably like, okay, just doing the normal, like, Indeed, LinkedIn, those types of sites. If you have military experience and you have a security clearance, site that I recommend is Clear Jobs. I think it's Clear Jobs USA. It's cleared. There's clearedjobs.net, and then there's clearancejobs.com. You can try those two. You might be playing a better numbers game with those other sites just because the requirement of the security clearance will cut down on the number of applicants going in the first place. So now those aren't specific to cybersecurity. That's just like government contracting jobs in particular, but there tend to be a lot of cybersecurity government contracting jobs as well. So that's a good place to look, but that's mainly if you already have a security clearance. Can you give a picture of how a fresh graduate with zero experience resume should look like? So I don't have one immediately available. Well, actually, I might. Let me go and pull this up. Number one, try to get some sort of experience, right? Like, even if it's not a job, internships are great. If you can find a local company definitely go and try that, like offer to see if like you can provide something for them for free or at a reduced rate. Another thing I would also recommend for people who are looking for jobs out of college and they're having a hard time playing the Indeed, the online job board numbers game, go and look at for like local businesses in your area that are doing cybersecurity, because chances are they aren't showing up as high on the job boards as like the super big national companies. And so you might be playing a better numbers game with local companies versus, the Googles, the Amazons, of the world. Okay, so let me switch my screen share now. And we're going to take a look at a sample resume here. Okay, so I've got the sample resume over here. I'll zoom in a little bit. So this is for someone who is a college student. They have some internship experience, and then they had like a summer gig here for like a non cybersecurity role, and then they have their cybersecurity club, and they did NCL. And so this is what this might look like. The things I would highlight here, during this internship, they mentioned like, hey, I reduced audit times by 85%, right? So that's demonstrating impact. That's like super valuable to do here in this type of resume. If you don't have any of these experiences, right, then you're kind of here with the extracurriculars. If you need to pad the space a little bit, you can take like the most rigorous technical courses that you took in college. You can put those on here and talk about like what skills you developed or what projects you worked on from those classes. That is a last resort. I really would not recommend that because it's not going to be the most impressive thing for a recruiter looking at it. So as much as possible, like get some sort of volunteer opportunity, internship, like anything here. I'm going to post a link to this in the chat as well if people are looking for a copy of this resume. Yeah, there you guys go. I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of people popping up here now as viewers. But yeah, that's like what you really need to do is just like talk about your experience of like, this is what I accomplished. You can see as well with the extracurriculars, like, hey, I calculated budgeted money, right? So like I'm trusted to handle money. I was able to do it. I led this thing and we had a 100% increase in membership, right? So anything that you can do to demonstrate impact, anything that you can do to impress an employer, that's what you want to do. Avoid just generally saying, hey, I did a thing, because I did a thing is different than I did a thing well. So focus on how you can indicate that you did a thing well. So like, for example, this like guide freshman mentees to overcome first year challenges. This is I did a thing. It didn't really describe how well I did the thing. That's going to happen. There are going to be things that like, there isn't like some big amazing thing that you can point to for every little, bit of experience that you have. That's okay. I would just say like maximize as much as possible anytime you can demonstrate impact of what you did. All right. What else do we have here? What about ATS score for the resume? So the ATS score is the automatic score that that like the job, like the applicant tracking system, the job board, what have you, assigns to your resume. I am probably not the best person to kind of give that advice because I don't personally use any of them on the hiring side. I would also be careful trying to overly optimize for those. My general advice is do enough that you're not going to be bottom of the list, but don't over optimize, because at a certain point, when you start optimizing for the automatic system, you start making sacrifices in terms of looking good in front of a human. And so when you finally get in front of a human, you don't want to look like you're just an optimized resume. It is obvious, right? Just like how people will be able to tell, like, hey, this looks like AI writing. You get like similar vibes of like a overly optimized resume. Like I've seen plenty of resumes where like it's like every single possible keyword is in there. They're like bolding like the different technologies in there. And it's like, yeah, this is like an AI optimized or an ATS optimized resume. Would you suggest using freelance websites or bug bounties? I assume you mean using them on your resume. 100%. Just make sure that you are, again, showing the impact. That's where like having samples of your work, copies of your report is going to be helpful, because just saying like, hey, I did a bug bounty, right? Everyone, like a lot of people are going to say, oh, I did a bug bounty. Demonstrating the impact that you had with what you found is going to be super important. All right. I think those are all of the big questions there. And we definitely went over the hour here that we had allocated. So I appreciate you all in the chat here. You help keep it lively for us. So if you have any other follow-up questions, I would recommend go check out our Discord. I'm going to put this here in the chat as well. You can get advice from other NCL players, as well as I might be checking in once in a while to see if anyone's got any questions I can help answer. No guarantees that I will see all of your questions there. Oops, that is, I typoed that link. Let me fix that. All right, let me fix that. There you go. All right. But yeah, if there's enough interest and you all want another one of these sessions, you can also mention that at Discord, and I'm happy to do another one of these later on in the season. But thanks for joining live, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the NCL season, and good luck. Take care.